College Football Playoffs Management Committee has proposed the idea of a 12 team format for the playoffs versus its current 4 team format. I want to pose the question to you guys. What would be the perfect number of college football teams in the playoffs going forward? I'll start with Jamar.
I personally loved it when it was only two people. There was no college playoff. It was literally some stats. The BCS was getting it together and it spit out who was number one, number two. And basically, the beauty of college football was it's a tournament the whole year round. And it's not a tournament after the season's over. That was the whole beauty in watching college football. Because it was like, do not lose because this is the tournament the whole year. Now, I understand there's certain teams that don't have the opportunity, and that's why we have the playoffs. But in my opinion, it is corrupt. There's these dudes in a room who get to pick who's in the playoffs every single year. And no matter what, I just feel like there's corruption in there. And the only way to get rid of that corruption is to expand it because you have so many teams available. But then you get to a point, it's just too much football, in my opinion, when you got players who are going to be opting out to play in the NFL. I just feel like it's going to be too many games. So I feel like it was best when it was just two teams.
I guess I'll take it. So I'm actually on the opposite side of him. I actually love the expansion. I love it. I don't think that opt-outs are going to be that much of a deal. We talked about that before because I think that you opt out when you're not incentivized to actually play, and a champion is enough incentive to where I don't believe people will opt out. But more on to the topic, man, 4 was terrible. I think 4 was a terrible number. If you weren't going to do 2, which I thought was also flawed because you had so many situations, the only way to get rid of the flaws was to add more teams and have more people have the opportunity. But 4 was terrible. You can't have a 4 and have 5 power conferences. That would be like everybody who wins their division in the NFL that they're not going to get into the playoffs. Only some of you will. So I think that was a terrible system. My ideal number would have been 8. I think that settled on it, but I like the 12. You know, you were probably going to call for expansion anyway. So maybe this buys you some more time. But I like the expansion of it, and if 12 is what it is, and I'm good with it. You got 6 winners. The 6 Oregon, they were the 8th winner at the Pac-12 last year. And if you're the 8th highest conference winner at that point, just write it off. You ain't deserved to be there anyway. They were the 2015 and then you have 6 at-larges. So I think you're going to see 6 conference champions, maybe 7. And then I think you're going to litter the rest with Notre Dame and a couple of Big Ten teams and a couple of SEC teams. And we're going to see more quality teams there, and we're going to have more chances. And hopefully, this is the one thing that I'm looking for, is that there's no longer this quest to be perfect, or this obsession, rather. I don't say quest, but the obsession to be perfect, where I'm going to go get this D2 team to play when I'm not playing conference. How about you look at it? You look at LSU 2019, one of the beautiful parts of their season is that they played an out-of-conference game like Texas. I want to see more teams go into these Power 5 teams and saying, hey, I know we're not in conference. I know this is not usually what's done, but I want to play you. I want to increase the competition because with 12 games, it's a bit less stress to be perfect because you have more room for error.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that point. My ideal number would be 8 to 12. And when you look at the 4, I think that, you know, introducing the college football playoff, they kind of wanted to start off small, but we kind of saw the problems with that every year, where every year there was a kind of 5th or a 6th team that you could make a legitimate argument should be in the top 4, and then it kind of made the BCS committee look bad. I think another thing that it does too is we've seen every year we kind of have a team that goes undefeated or a team that comes out the woodworks, but the BCS committee pretty much kind of makes them prove it another year, which they never get the chance to do. We've seen like UCF, Cincinnati, a TCU, or a Boise State. I think they were before the college football playoff, but going undefeated, but not really having the chance to compete for anything meaningful. So now the BCS committee can cover their backs and say, oh, okay, well, we put UCF in the playoffs. It's not our fault they lost to Alabama by 50, or, you know, or whatever the situation is, right? Instead of them, you know, kind of just being able to say, we didn't get the chance. We went undefeated and don't have anything to show for it. So I think 8 to 12 teams is the ideal scenario. And I think when we look at it, we praise college basketball and March Madness for the passion. Anything being able to happen in one game, the upsets, and really the madness of it. And I think you can kind of get that same aura with the college football playoffs, right? Because we're naturally going to see some upsets. Anything can happen in one game. And like Darian said, I think that if you have 12 teams, with all of these teams having supreme confidence, they all feel like they'll have a chance to win the national championship. You may have some blue chip prospects, maybe some top 5 overall prospects or something that opt out. But I don't think the opt-outs will be a huge problem to where it'll affect the quality on the field. So I think that 4 was a good kind of beta test to start it off, but I think you always were going to have to go to 8 to 12, considering the problems with the current system you had with 4 teams. But I agree with a lot of the points Darian made. I think 8 to 12 would be a good number. And I think this actually takes some pressure off the BCS committee, because now the actual quality of the football teams and the games will decide the playoffs. Whereas before it was them just kind of picking the 4 best teams subjectively. Now I think the best team in college football will really be decided by the play on the field.
Yeah, John took the words right out of my mouth. Go ahead, Darian.
Yeah, something real quick. I do want to say I love the fact that they're adding a little bit of structure. You have years where it's like, how did Alabama beat out Ohio State? How did Ohio State beat out Penn State? And they lost to them in the conference championship. And now you know that the top 4 teams will have a bye. And you know if you win your conference, you're going to make it, because 6 of those are going to win. 6 of those are going to make it. So it's a little bit about structure, and then it's by however you're ranked at the end of the season in addition to that. So I love the actual structure that they have. And even adding the bye week, it kind of makes them feel somewhat like the pro. And I know earlier we talked about preparing you for the next level. So that bye week could be a little bit of a preparation for the NFL season.
And I will also say, I think structure and some sort of, if this happens, you're in, is there, because I just have always felt like it's so commercialized, because whoever's in that room could have any type of influence, like, oh, if we get LSU and Alabama or whatever, we're going to make more money, or whatever the case may be. I just feel like the way it was constructed, it was just made for the perfect way to have a corrupt way of playing the games, to be for money, to be for whatever reasons. I think there has to be some type of rule set. And if that is the case, I'm all for it, because I just don't want to see teams with 4 losses, 3 losses, who are like a Texas make it just because they're Texas. I want to see the real top 12 teams that actually deserve it be in the top 12. I just feel like regardless of how many teams are in there, I feel like sometimes just because of the way it's set up, with some dudes getting in the room and picking the teams, it's just a trailblazed way to just have corruption.
Yeah, I think John took the words right out of my mouth. I think 12 teams takes the pressure off the committee a little bit more to get it right, to get the format right, to get the matchups right. And so I'm all in for a 12-team playoffs here going forward. But let us know what you guys think in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe, share this with somebody you know. Thanks for tuning in to Spot On Sports, where we're not just accurate, we're spot on.
Welcome to SOS Extras, where our analysts get their hottest takes off their chest. John, you have 1 minute.
All right, so we saw Major League Baseball recently crack down on pitchers using sticky stuff to have more control over the ball. We saw increased spin rates from the pitchers, and we saw really the hitters being able to hit less than they have in previous seasons, because the pitchers had the advantage. So, of course, the MLB stepped in, and they said 10-game suspension for these players, ejections. The team might not be able to replace them. And I just think it's, we saw Major League Baseball, they kind of supported the steroid era because they wanted to see bigger offense and more home runs. We saw when home runs were down, right? They kind of changed the size of the balls and different things. But now that pitchers are dominating in the MLB, they crack down on them harshly. We talked about the offenses kind of being supported in these leagues and the defenses kind of being shut out. And that's all we're seeing right here. The pitchers had an advantage, and now they're taking it away because the MLB, they want to see the home runs and they want to see the big offensive explosions. Sucks for the pitchers. Everybody in baseball cheats, but, MLB didn't want the home run. So this is what we get.
Mia, what you got?
All right, North Crowley High School basketball coach in Texas is proposing to the UIL for them to add shot clocks to high school basketball games. I think this is a pretty good idea. It prepares these teams for playing at the next level, playing college ball, playing pro ball, and so forth. I think it also levels the playing field, where you can't just hold on to the ball the last 8 minutes of the game. You have to keep the ball moving. You have to keep scoring and keep the game rolling in that sense. And so you have coaches who coach fundamentals, and they teach their kids to slow down and get a good shot off. I think you can still do that within 24 seconds or 30 seconds. So overall, I think the shot clock should at least be considered and should be administered for varsity games.
What you got there?
Xavier Howard is one of the few big names to really hold out this mini camp in order to get a contract. And I have a slight problem with it. And it's not just him. And actually, him and Zeke that are the two guys who really come to my mind that have done this. I don't have a problem with people holding out, but I have a problem when you hold out and you're not on the last year of your contract. That's me personally. I feel like holding out should be when you have 1 year left. Xavier signed an extension 2 years ago, and he has 4 years left on it. I don't believe that right now he should be holding out. I do believe in players having some power and having leverage. However, I do think that there's a certain level of contract obligation that you have. And I just don't think that when you're holding out more than a year before your contract is over, you really abide it.
The Dallas Mavericks lost Dirk Nowitzki and then got another great right afterwards. And he is not going anywhere. They came out with a report saying that Luka has some rifts with some of the front office. He's not going anywhere. A couple of days right before the rift supposedly came out, he said, when asked about having the possible Supermax extension or the rookie extension, he said, you know exactly what I'm going to do. So I think this, Mark said it, he said it's BS. This isn't going to happen. Luka isn't going nowhere. He came from overseas. He is going to get his money. I believe he loves it in Dallas. I believe he's going to get another co-star that's not named Porzingis in the next 2 years. And we're going to win championships. So he's not going anywhere. And that's SOS discussions. No, this is SOS extras. So we'll see y'all next time.